Mornings can be hectic. We get it. You're pressed for time, but you still want to stay informed. Let the connector from Boise State Public Radio do the work for you. Every weekday morning, this quick and convenient podcast delivers the top Idaho news stories you need to know, all in the time it takes to brew your coffee or start your commute. No scrolling, no searching, just hit play and get connected. Listen to the Connector Idaho Daily News wherever you get your podcasts.
From the studios of Boise State Public Radio News, I'm Samantha Wright, filling in for Jim Gaudette's Idaho Matters. You may have noticed that the price of vanilla has skyrocketed in the past 10 years. This spice, which mostly grows in Madagascar, is a staple for cooking and seasoning, and it's a perfect storm of factors that drove up the price to 10 times what it was in 2015. This has been a boon for vanilla farmers, but it's also created some problems, including the theft of crops and much higher prices for goods in the towns around vanilla farms. Isaac Castellano is an associate clinical professor at Boise State School of Public Service. He's been studying what's been going on in Madagascar and how private militias are popping up to protect the vanilla crops. And he's here to share some of his research with us. Hi, Isaac. How's it going?
Good. Thank you for having me.
Okay, tell me where you went in Madagascar, and where is it?
Madagascar is off the coast of the African continent, pretty far south. If you go directly across the Mozambique Channel from Mozambique, you will get to Madagascar, which is about 800 miles in length and home to around 28 million people, depending on which census estimates you believe.
And is it true that most of the vanilla in the world comes out of Madagascar? Why is that?
About 80% of the vanilla crop globally comes out of Madagascar, followed by Indonesia, Mexico, Tahiti, and Uganda are some of the other producers. Madagascar has really a very ideal climate. Vanilla grows very well in the tropics, but needs a dry season to pollinate. And Madagascar has a very kind of predictable dry season, although the last decade or so has seen a small shift by a matter of a few weeks in terms of when the dry season ends. But that dry season allows for the pollination to successfully occur.
And tell us about the vanilla bean, the vanilla plant. I read that it's actually an orchid plant. I have to admit, I've tried to grow orchids. There's actually one on my desk that's languishing. It's not easy. Tell me about this kind of farming and the plant itself.
The vanilla is a difficult crop to cultivate and really provides essentially a year-round task for farmers. So in the fall, October or so is when the hand pollination has to occur. Which is a pretty tedious thing to do. When I traveled to Madagascar in December, I had the opportunity to be shown how this occurs. And it is very easy to essentially destroy the flower in the process of pollinating. So very, very difficult task. And so you hand pollinate in around October, and the beans begin to sprout roughly in late November, early December. But then you don't harvest until May or June or July, depending on where you're at in Madagascar specifically, and then the variety you have.
And
then, go ahead.
I understand that the price shot up in 2015. What happened?
There were a series of cyclone storms that destroyed a huge chunk of the crop on Madagascar in conjunction with an increase in demand, some kind of emergence of middle class in China that increased demand, and then additionally kind of a focus in the West around having natural, real vanilla, and not the kind of synthetic extract that if you are a baker, is much more affordable than the real stuff.
I have seen the price of vanilla go up myself. I did a little informal poll around the office this morning, and all the bakers knew exactly what I was talking about. That higher price, as I said in the intro, that's a boon for farmers, but it's caused some problems. Tell me about some of the changes that have been happening in Madagascar.
Yeah, so after that price increase, 2015, 2016, it went from about 20, $40 a kilo up to about 500,
Wow.
really just within one growing season. And what emerged were people who were willing to come onto a farmer's land and cut down the unripe vanilla beans and just outright steal them. The thing about vanilla in Madagascar is that almost all of the production is small scale because of that pollination I mentioned and the difficulty of growing it. The basically 4 years between when you first plant and when you're able to harvest. It's almost all small plots. And so farmers were finding that the thieves were coming onto their land and they organized these militias. They call them reliable eyes in Malagasy, the local language. And I went to several villages and they all had these militias and they had some training programs and leaders. They had mandatory retirement age, 50, and a minimum joining age, depending on the village, 18 or 25. And they had weapons and traps. Some have very old firearms, these old 22s from the 1940s that are quite long and big. They impose curfews and communicate with other villages about happenings in their community. So pretty organized, meeting this definition within the political science literature about what is a militia.
And these are not government organizations. These are farmers who have taken it on themselves and are doing this sort of thing. It's sleeping with the crops at night to keep thieves away.
Exactly. The farmers I interviewed have these huts in their fields that they sleep in from basically February until harvest, roughly June. And they bring out a mosquito net if they have one, and then basically just keep one eye open as they sleep. So it's a very difficult time between February and June for vanilla farmers.
Wow, we're speaking with Isaac Castellano, Associate Clinical Professor at Boise State School of Public Service, about his research on vanilla farms in Madagascar. And you study things like environmental scarcity and conflict. So through those eyes, what are you seeing with your research into the vanilla trade?
Well, we're seeing not just around vanilla, but other commodities that have price volatility. Security systems, security processes emerge more or less in the absence of meaningful state action. So anytime you see a new commodity that might become very valuable very quickly, it becomes a target for thieves. And if the state doesn't have a meaningful response, then citizens have to take it upon themselves to protect their assets. These vanilla farmers I interviewed are, well below the poverty line, living on very little. So a theft of even a small portion of their vanilla crop really means they might go without food and other basic supplies. And so this is really all they have. They have to do something, and this is what they've organized to do.
Well, and it's not just the farmers. The whole towns around these vanilla farms have changed, where the prices of things have increased dramatically, especially during seasons when there's a lot of people who have come in to pick the beans. And that's, the first thing I thought of when I was looking at this, it reminds me a little of an Old West mining town where suddenly there's this skyrocketing demand for resources around, say, gold or silver mining. And in this case, it would be vanilla beans.
Well, there are these middlemen buyers, essentially, that come in because the government, in its effort to clamp down on this, they have responded, but their response has just added another layer of complication for farmers. If you're going to move vanilla between villages in the Sava region of Madagascar, you need a special permit. A lot of villagers can't afford to purchase these permits. And so buyers come to the villages, and some farmers have told me that some of these buyers come and they promise one price, and then they take the vanilla and they come back and they say, oh, I can only get a lower price. And so there's these kind of scams that have emerged. Vanilla, the end price for vanilla is based not so much on the actual weight, but on the quality. And the quality is drawn out in the post-harvest process where they cure the vanilla. And there's this very complicated series of steps that farmers go through to cure their vanilla. So you have this other layer. If you don't have your crop stolen when it's on the vine, you might lose out on a price on a scam from a middleman, or you have to kind of pay the corrupt government to move your vanilla to the city where there might be a more reputable buyer, and that's its own hurdle. So any vanilla that you're getting from Madagascar, unless it's been, there's a few companies that have different systems that perhaps are a bit better for the farmers themselves, but they're a small portion of the market. So most of the vanilla we're consuming has been through kind of an arduous process.
It sounds like it. And it sounds like the farmers are too often caught in the middle.
Yes. And the folks I spoke to were really appreciative of having someone come and hear their story and tell their story. And I'll just say that this is not going to be the only group of farmers around the world that will have to manage a thing like this if we continue to see the kind of impacts we've seen so far from climate change and other kind of new security problems emerging in similar contexts around the world.
Well, yeah, I could see how this could happen, all over the place, and it's kind of I don't know. It's a fascinating situation, but it's a little scary. It's a little scary.
Well, we could imagine here, a small parallel to the United States was in 2013 in California, there was a rash of water tanker trucks being stolen. And that year was a particularly bad drought for California. And, obviously producers, other folks seeing the economic benefit of being able to transport water during a drought. So this is, in my kind of line of research, this is the kind of patterns that I study, is where we see kind of new security problems emerge around scarcity. I don't want to cause any panic or alarm, but the increasing price of eggs, for example, is an area that we might see some potential problems if the trends continue to go upward on the price.
So what's next? We've got about a minute left. What's next for you? You're writing, I think, an article on what's happening in Madagascar?
Yes, I'm writing a journal article, and I'm planning to return and do another round of interviews. I'm particularly interested in the long-term impact of how these militias might affect other elements of day-to-day life in the villages, and what their interaction is with police and other government agencies. As we see, security organizations emerge in the absence of state activity, they fill the gap essentially of state action. And so what does that look like, and what are some of the other kind of downstream effects of these vanilla militias?
Well, it's a fascinating topic, and I really appreciate you coming on the show and telling us a little bit about it.
Thank you for having me.
We've been speaking with Isaac Castellano, Associate Clinical Professor at Boise State School of Public Service, about his research on vanilla farms in Madagascar.
And that'll do it for this episode of Idaho Matters. Thanks so much for listening. And just a reminder, you can find all of our episodes wherever you get your podcasts.
We're more than just podcasts and a radio station at Boise State Public Radio. We're a trusted resource and a lifeline for communities across Idaho. It's up to all of us to safeguard public media's future. You can learn more at protectmypublicmedia.org. Together, we can ensure that Boise State Public Radio remains a trusted resource for you and your neighbors for generations to come.